On today's show, we continue our Houston Rockets draft profile series focusing on French wing Zaccharie Risacher. We'll tackle his strengths, his weaknesses, possible NBA player comps, projected draft range, his fit with the Houston Rockets, and so much more. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That's the best way you can help our show out. Just go comment, go Rockets, in the YouTube comments. It helps a ton. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Dr. Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Here as we continue our Houston Rockets draft profile series. Our last episode, we covered Alex Sarr, the possible number 1 overall pick, although there's still a possibility he slips down to number 3 for the Houston Rockets, so be sure to go check that one out. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the, maybe not quite the French freak, the French phenom that Wemby is, but Zaccharie Risacher from JL Bourg, playing overseas in France. And this guy is, I'm going to be completely honest right out of the gate, Madison, not one of my favorite prospects. Yeah. I don't know what it is about Zach, and we're going to unpack this as we get through the episode and whatnot. But there's just like nothing about his game jumps out at me, and maybe that's actually a good thing. That there's nothing good or bad that like jumps out crazy big. But let's start like we usually do. Give me your elevator pitch for Zaccharie Risacher.
Yeah, so Risacher, his selling point is a 6'9" jumbo wing that offers positional versatility, shooting, and defensive versatility. Like that is your sell for Zach Risacher, and these type of guys are at a premium in the league. Guys are looking for these jumbo wings, 6'9", 6'10", and up wings that can guard on the perimeter and also guard down the lineup in the 4 and sometimes 5. And so that is the shiny thing that this league is after, and that's why Risacher is at the top of these boards, especially in a weak draft. It's another time to get a shot at this 3-and-D wing that offers this positional versatility. But when you dig deeper into his game, he truly is just a 3-and-D wing at the moment. He's a young guy. He's a good shooter, not a great shooter, right? Who offers some really good off-ball defense, some decent on-ball defense. He really does, but not a lot of upside in the way of creation, right? And he played for, like we talked about with Sarr, a European team that wants to win right now, and he did earn minutes on that team. He was an effective player on that team, spacing the floor, attacking closeouts, and getting out in transition and making plays. And so when you look at a guy with those type of tools, with that shooting upside and really that defensive upside, it really intrigues a lot of teams from a prospect standpoint, and that is the biggest sell of Zaccharie Risacher right now.
You mentioned his height, so 6'9", although there's a little bit of kind of ambiguity about his measurements because he didn't attend the NBA draft combine. So we're going off some speculation here with guys who have scouted him, seen him in person, kind of, it's a little bit kind of some hearsay going on. But right now, what we think he is about 6'9" with a 6'10" wingspan, which is better than some of the other reported information because you've got some sites that have him at 6'8" with a 6'7" wingspan, and that's a little bit tougher to stomach if you're talking about drafting a wing that's got a wingspan that's smaller than his actual height. Yeah. For me, obviously getting into like the positives for his game, right? I get it. Like he screams to me like almost like that connective piece offensively, right? Connective tissue piece. We like to throw that terminology around a lot. But a guy that is going to almost be plug and play, right? Like you can slot him in, some positional versatility there. The shooting is nice. There's not really a major like flaw or hole in, I guess, the major area of his game, which is the outside shooting, right? He's comfortable when it comes to putting the ball on the floor. He can make some things happen. I don't know if it's because like the main thing that I've noticed when I watch him play is the dude has like zero wiggle to his game, and like that bothers me. Like I don't know what it is, but he seems like, dude, we talk about how stiff Jabari looked. I feel like Zach is also kind of stiff, like up and down a little bit, like when he moves.
To me, I actually thought he surprisingly moved well for his size. I thought he was actually pretty surprisingly move fast, but he can't do it. He has to do it when the defense is already in motion. Like he can't create anything if he like from a standstill on a set defense. Yeah. And that's where I think you're talking about right now. It's like, and that builds into the creation part of his game. And right now, like he screams safe. Like this guy is going to be an NBA player because he does two things. He's big as hell for his position, and he shoots the ball. And he's like, and when it kind of goes into his strengths, like he's always ready to shoot. He's always he has good shot prep, you know what I mean? And he has a quick release, and at that size, it's very hard to block it. But he really doesn't offer much else in the form of creation and upside that you would want in a top 3 pick that we talk about. But let's kind of just talk about some of the things that he does really well. So like we already talked about the jump shooting. He's a good catch and shoot guy. He has some movement shooting things.
And it's worth noting. Look, I know I kind of came out of the gate a little hot, being down on him. I do like the shooting, right? Like the shooting stroke looks nice, right? Great catch and release guy. Could be, projects to be a great like movement shooter, right? And that's something we've talked about this Rockets team is sorely missing. But at the same time, maybe that's because I'm getting caught up in the idea of like him being a one-dimensional kind of player is the problem. And maybe that's why I'm having a harder time seeing past that for him as a prospect.
I'm right with you. And that's why he's not going to be probably in my top 5 on my big board, especially not my Rockets big board, even though he fits a position of need. But we'll talk when we get into the weaknesses, I'll explain for me why those things aren't popping the same way they're not popping for you. You know what I mean? Especially in this type of draft. But like I said, man, if it comes to jumbo size shooters, he can do that, right? I think he's a good shooter. I think he has good shot prep.
And we do know it's worth noting, just as we're getting into the strengths here, though, I mean, it's worth noting the Rockets have in the past prioritized kind of those jumbo hoopers, right? Yeah. Those jumbo wings are the guys that, because you can't teach height. And if you can be, if you're bigger, stronger, faster, whatever than the other players, the Rockets have kind of prioritized more, I think, the measurables in the past than necessarily the skill sets, which we talked about this in the Reed Shepherd episode, but that's potentially a knock on Reed Shepherd, is that his physicals aren't, he doesn't jump out as like a physical phenom, right? His skills are off the charts, but his physicals might be the thing that holds him back from the Rockets actually selecting him number 3 overall. So this is a point in favor of Zach, the fact that his physicals are kind of off the charts, minus the fact that he doesn't have a lot of explosiveness to his game. But
he's not the most explosive guy, but I think in transition, he actually has a lot of pop. You know what I mean? Like he actually can handle the ball very well in transition. And like I said, when in attacking closeouts as well, he's not just a spot up shooter. He can put the ball on the floor and attack a closeout and kind of attack it with some finesse. And I actually think he has a lot of touch on the ball where he can get the ball up high off the glass. And those are some things that I think go underrated about his game. He can attack closeouts very well. He has a mix of Euro steps in his game sometimes, and he finishes high off the glass with some good touch. And that is what I like about his offensive game. He also moves well without the ball.
We haven't used this word yet. He's polished. I'll give him that. Like he is very, very
you can tell
polished.
He's worked hard. You can tell he's worked hard on this game. He knows what he wants to be. He understands his role, and he tries to play it to a T. And that guy is always ready to shoot. And not just those pluses on offense, but also I think he's a pretty good defender. I wouldn't say elite. I wouldn't say elite by any means, but like he's in position on time, and that's really good for young players. And a lot of people will say and tell you, and I agree, that his best thing that he does defensively is off ball. Like he's always in position. He's not some great shot blocker or, some real stopper in that way. He's not a stopper, but he's in position. He's smart. He knows where to be, and that size matter, right? When you have a 6'10" wingspan, and when you're 6'9", that those things matter. And then you don't hurt teams with poor shooting. You're a good shooter. Then you really have the makings of a starting player in the NBA. You can start to kind of lose yourself in the imagination of the upside of this guy. But honestly, though, he just really has prototypical 3-and-D wing skills. And there's really not much more after that.
But it's tough because you start looking at those 3-and-D skills as like the foundation, right? Like, okay, if he's got that strong foundation, what more could he evolve into, right? And you start looking at how polished, and that's how I can see why people are talking themselves into, oh, he should be the number 1 overall pick. He could be a superstar. Like if he adds this, and I feel like the upper end outcome for him, and we're going to get into this when we get into the comps and stuff. I feel like this is a guy that's got that incredibly high floor, and he's going to be a quality NBA player, but I don't know if he's ever going to pop the way that a lot of people think he's going to. So we're going to get into some of the other downsides from his game, talk about some of the weaknesses, as well as getting into his NBA comps that you've got teed up for us. Madison, we're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Right now you can take a look at the outright betting favorites for the number 1 overall pick in this year's 2024 NBA draft. Alex Sarr, currently the odds-on favorite, minus 170 to go number 1 overall. Right behind him, Zaccharie Risacher, the guy that we're talking about in today's episode, plus 170. And then a distant third place, Donovan Clingan at plus 1,500. So for all those odds and so much more, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every shot count. FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, we kind of went through, and I feel like we're doing a disservice to Zach here, man, because like our other prospect profiles, we've come out strong, gassing him up with the strengths and everything, and we kind of glazed over the strengths, and now we're about to tear this kid apart with the weaknesses, because I want to like it. Like I need somebody to sell me on Zach the way you sold me on Stephon Castle is what I need. I need to go find like Zach's number 1 super fan and just hear what they have to say about him to see if it changes my perception of him. But he's the one prospect that I'm having a really hard time. There are like 10 different guys that I could talk myself into from a Rockets perspective, and this is the one that I'm just like, I'm really struggling with it. I don't know. I really don't know why. So hit me with it, Madison. What are you feeling? Why? We talked about segment 1, right? He doesn't pop, right? What to you? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So for me, Zaccharie Risacher doesn't pop because he's supposed to be built as this 3-and-D wing, but he's not a defensive stopper. He's not, and he's a guy that doesn't use his physicality in the ways that you would want with a guy with his size and skill set, right? A guy that's 6'9" with a 6'10" wingspan. When he drives to the rim, you want him to hit guys in the chest, finish through contact, right? Like we're not even asking him to do some crazy creation, but he doesn't really have much pop off the standstill. That size doesn't pop. The physicality, he doesn't play in a way where he moves guys with that size. And we can chalk that up to strength, but it's also a play style. We talked about Sarr and the strength being a weakness. We know that strength is a weakness for many rookies, right? But also play style can be the thing that changes. As they get stronger, are you shying away from contact? And to me, Risacher over and over again finishes with just finesse around the rim. He's always avoiding contact. And a guy that size at 6'10", like it's good that he has that in his toolkit, but he has to be able to use his physicality more, or you lessen the impact of your size, right? And that's what I think why he doesn't really pop for me. He's not this on-ball stopper. You're not going to put him on your superstars. And yeah, he might get there someday, but to me, there's nothing on the film. He's a smart defender, but he's just a good defender. I don't want to put him on an island with your best player and tell him that, hey, go be physical with him. Go use your length to really disrupt this guy. And those things he doesn't really have in his game right now. And I don't want to seem like I'm beating up on the kid, but those are the type of things that I'm looking for if we're projecting this guy to most likely be a 3-and-D wing with this jumbo mindset. You have to use that jumbo profile to your advantage. And to me, he doesn't do that, right? And I think I think a lot of people are lulled into the upside of what this guy can be, but he has to play with toughness if he's going to be a high-level starting 3-and-D. And another thing, I think he's a good shooter. I don't think he's a great shooter. I don't think he's a Michael Porter Jr. shooter, right? He had a very hot start to the season, and then he cooled off in a major way at the second half of the season. He did have some good playoff games, right? And so when you think about that, like, what if that shooting doesn't pop in the way that you need it to pop? What if he's not this high-level movement shooter or really, really high-level shooter? He's just an average shooter, 36 to 38% shooter, right, on low volume. What type of player does that look like if you're not a defensive stopper? Right. And then his game gets to devolving, right? He's a safe player. He's going to be a good NBA player, but I'm not sold on, the cojones factor that I would want in a guy with that size playing with physicality on defense and offense and really having those things pop. And, I like his shot prep, but to me, he has some issues he has to clean up there. He has a tendency sometimes to kind of flick his wrist and shoot too quick and not hold the follow through. I like his shot much more with the follow through. And to me, when you start to compound all those things, you understand that there's a lot of work to be done there. But I do think his skill set is built for the NBA, and at least he's working on that type of skill set that gets him onto the floor.
Yeah, the sub 40% shooting numbers at the rim the past couple of years, not great. The 3-point shooting is solid, but it's not jumping off the page the same way it does with like Reed Shepherd, right? Where you're like, oh my God, this guy can shoot, right? Like you're just like, okay, he's an average shooter. And like you said, right, started off hot, cooled down a little bit. So how much do you chalk that up to? Like, did he just get lucky? Like, is this an outlier season where he lucked into having a hot start, right as he's getting ready to declare for the draft and everything? Like, I don't know. There's so many question marks about this kid's game. Let's get into some of the comps, because this will help me kind of envision some of what you're seeing, some of his possible pathways, outcomes could be. So we know the drill. So it's low end, mid tier, high end outcomes. So let's start with our low ends.
Yeah. So low end, I got two guys on the very, very low end, and that is Patrick Baldwin and Zaire Williams. Okay. These are guys with, right. So, but that's what I'm talking about. These are guys who didn't use their physicality very well. I don't think he'll become these guys, right? But when we talk about low end guys, like, this is the lowest of the low. And this is why I think a lot of times we see these jumbo guys and, automatically want to think about their high end, but we need to consider the down end of that and how their play styles and how toughness really zeroes in. Now, I'm not trying to say he's not tough, but I'm just saying these are the low end guys: Patrick Baldwin, Zaire Williams. And then when you take it a step up with low end, I think Tony Snell, Justin Holiday, and Darius Baisley, these are big jumbo sized wings who are pretty good defenders, pretty good shooters, but none of them do it at a high enough clip to really start in this league, right? They had good moments, some highs, some lows, but that is what we're talking about. If these other areas don't pop in a real way, then you end up with a Tony Snell, a Justin Holiday, or a Darius Baisley. And those guys are all similar size to Risacher, right? And so let's get on to if some of those things do start to pop, like the shooting, the movement shooting, they pop in a real way, but he's just an average to below average defender. I think Buddy Hield and Doug McDermott are good comps in that way in the median area, right? These guys are pseudo starters, can, give you good minutes off the out of pinch, but are always ready to shoot. I mean, the way this guy is prepped to shoot really reminds me of Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield's always locked and loaded. And so that's why he's always with his hands up, right? And so those type of guys, if the defense doesn't really pop and he's just a good team defender, good average defender, then I think Buddy Hield and Doug McDermott are good comps for him, big wings who can shoot. All right, now if the defense begins to pop in a real way, let's say that his best defensive attribute is his rotational ability, but say he's not that great on ball, then we're looking at somebody like Robert Covington, right? A really good shooter, a guy who can rotate. He uses his size well. He has positional versatility. And now we're starting to get into some very valuable players for playoff teams, right? And another guy, if these things start to pop in that way again, I think is Nick Batum. I think Nick Batum would be an excellent outcome. And this is what guys are starting to envision, what you can really get from him. A very high impact player that can start on a championship team.
But Batum, I could see a little bit, especially when you start thinking like young Nick Batum, right? Like his Blazers really days a little bit. Like, but Batum, not so much lately. He's been a little bit more just your prototypical 3-and-D, whatever. But, especially back with those Blazers teams, like he did some ball handling. He could score a little bit. He could do a little bit of everything. Maybe not like a Swiss Army knife, but again, really polished, reliable shooter, good defender. Okay, I can see that a little bit. All right.
That's what I'm saying. Put the ball on the floor a little bit, can do a little bit of everything, and provide some good defense. So that was is if those things really start to pop and the physicality start to pop. Okay, and then we can take it up a step further with guys in the same vein, but I think are a bit of higher end. It's like Trey Murphy. That's if the jump shooting really pops in a real way. If that jump shooting really pops in a real way, that defense comes through, he starts to use his physicality, his length in a real way. This is what guys are envisioning that he will be in the top three, a Trey Murphy type player. Another guy, if the jump shot really comes through, and I honestly think it's a good comp defensively, like what we see that how the defense is good but not great, Michael Porter Jr. Right? You just think about how Michael Porter Jr. doesn't really use his size in the paint very well. And that's the type of stuff I'm talking about Zaccharie Risacher.
He's like the smallest 6'10" you'll find in the league.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like you're not going to see Risacher in a dunker spot role because he just has no pop in that type of role. But that's the same with Michael Porter Jr. But what if that jump shot comes on really strong? And this is just an elite clutch shooter.
Pretty much the only thing MPJ uses his height for is to get that shot off. That's basically it.
Exactly. And that's what Risacher, I think that's a realistic outcome. And I think a lot of people are hoping for him. And probably he could be a little bit better on defense. Another guy that I think if the offense, the transition offense, because I think he's really good in transition, a really good finisher in transition. If those things start to pop along with the shooting, I think Kyle Kuzma is another guy that fits his build, and he could turn into that if the other offensive outputs come out. And finally, I think this is probably his highest tier outcome and what guys are really looking forward to or looking for, Jaden McDaniels. I think if that defense pops in a real way, he starts to add that real toughness and physicality, can become an on-ball defender and still shoot the ball at a high level and kind of work on his other areas of his game, become a better finisher. Jaden McDaniels is, I think, what NBA teams are looking at with this type of guy. Like, this is the type of prototypical wing that is an impact wing that is invaluable to a championship team.
Man, it's so tough because you named a lot of good players in there, and I'm still struggling with it. Like this is. I feel genuinely bad. I'm gonna write a letter like apologizing to Zach because I don't know what it is about. Sometimes there's just a player or a prospect or whatever, and you just cannot get behind it. Like you can't fathom the hype. Like everybody else is gassing this kid up or whatever, and I'm sitting here thinking, I can't get there. I just there, and it's more so also about there's just so many other names that I'd prefer like ahead of this guy for the Rockets. Now, that being said, we're still doing our due diligence here. We're still talking about it because there is still a very realistic possibility where maybe the Rockets do their internal evaluations, right? And they think he's the best guy on their board. Again, the physicals are there. The skill is there. The polish is there. Maybe they think those foundational pieces of his game are good enough for them to build up and turn into, something that is ideally more than just your prototypical 3-and-D piece or somebody who kind of skews a little bit more towards those lower end outcomes. But that's what we got to talk about next is what his fit would look like with this Houston Rockets team, why the Rockets would be interested in him, and some of the reasons why they wouldn't be interested in him. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, we all carry around different stressors. Could be something big, could be something small. And when you keep these things bottled up, it can really start to affect your life in negative ways. Therapy is a safe space to get things off of your chest and to figure out how to work through whatever is weighing you down. Look, I've done therapy in the past, and I found it to be an incredibly cathartic experience to have an unbiased third party kind of help highlight and it kind of walk me through some of the things that I was dealing with in my personal life. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, talking about Zaccharie Risacher right now. And Madison, one of the things that I think is important for us to discuss here when we're talking about his potential fit with the Rockets, right, is it feels like every prospect that we've talked about so far has brought something different to the table, something that maybe this Rockets core of the core six doesn't already have. I feel like there's a lot of like duplicative skill sets here in what Risacher potentially brings to the table as a player. When you look at guys like a Tari, Eason, guys like a Jabari Smith Jr., guys who are already arguably doing what Risacher projects to do, but better already, or they're already comfortable in their role doing it. So if you're the Rockets, do you really want to add another 3-and-D wing when you already have Jabari, who's kind of already a 3-and-D wing, Tari, who is a 3-and-D wing? Like, you know, and granted, we don't want to box those guys in. There's still a possibility for them to be more than that in their careers, right? As they're growing, they're going into their third years respectively. But do you want to add another one of those guys to your role? You can make the argument that there's never enough of those guys in the NBA. We talked about that a lot in segment 1. That's what every NBA team is prioritizing, is getting as many of those 3-and-D type of players as possible. So maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but at the same time, kind of feels like you want to diversify your assets a little bit, right? Diversify your skill set, you know, shore up a different position or another spot. And again, that's not too much, try not to get too much into the fit angle of it, but just thinking long-term about what this team needs. And I don't know if adding yet another 3-and-D piece is the right move.
Yeah, I think the biggest sell is the Rockets need better shooting. And, you know, theoretically, this is a high-level shooting prospect with defensive versatility. But I think we have enough of those on the team. I think
on a small sample size, though.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
I don't think it's a small sample size. I think I heard Gavoni say he played 72 games this season. I didn't see all 72. I thought it was around 50. You know what I mean? And he took a decent amount of shots, but only the first half of the season was like, he was like almost 50% in the first half, like 48%. And then he really came down to earth in the second half. But these are young guys, man. It's just, it's hard to be consistent right now. You know what I mean? And so, but this guy, you can theoretically think him up to be, somewhere down the line, a guy that defenses really respect at a high level at the very least. And so I think that would be the selling point. I just think there are better prospects at that. And to me, he doesn't offer enough defensive toughness to really break Ime Udoka's lineup with the type of defensive presences we offer with at least average shooting. But I do think he fits here. You can never have enough wings. And with that defensive versatility, he's going to be able to play the 4 through 2. Right. So that's 3 spots for him to be interchangeable on the line in this lineup. And he's going to offer spacing, which we need around Sengun. So I think that's the real selling point. And I think those type of players, they fit in everywhere. And that's why his stock is so high right now. Because those type of guys, you can find a spot for a guy who can play, who can sustain you on defense and offer good shooting at that size and versatility.
Yeah, I'm so torn on this, man. Like, not even torn on it. Like, I'm trying to walk myself through it. And there's about 5 or 6 other names that I'd like ahead of this guy. And this is probably going to be our most painful draft profile episode.
But what if he becomes an elite shooter? Let me try.
Okay. All right.
Let me try and sell you, because I see you struggling. Okay, what if this guy truly is just this tremendous worker and becomes an absolutely elite shooter? Okay, and not only does he become an elite shooter, a lot of his problems are due to strength. There are a lot of strength-based problems that we know prospects add in the long term. And not just that, I know shot creation is an issue for him, but this guy pulls out some very nice step backs and very surprising good handle moves, which kind of flashes a bit of upside there too, that he can get to his step back and really create space. Now he doesn't make them. Okay, he's short on them. He comes up short on them all the time, but he creates that necessary space. And I think he's short on them because he has a strength issue. Like, honest to God, like that's what it looks like. He's straining to get it to the rim, basically. But once he adds that strength, once that polish, and he's made a lot of progress since then. Like, if this guy becomes a 6'10" guy who really, his body's going to fill out well, who really trains him to be a physical defensive stopper. If he goes through MA's gauntlet of, teaching him the technique, he has the physical tools to really make a difference. And we're in the conference with Luka Doncic. That is a good point. We need to be able to throw different types of defenders, different lengths. And this guy, say Jabari's having a bad game, this guy can step up for him. Add another hot and another element to this team with a guy with really some good upside to be a very, very good three-point shooter. So if that off-the-dribble shooting pops in a real way and MA gets him to be a very physical, very good defender, then you're looking at a high level impactful starter.
I will say, and we talked about this a little bit, kind of off camera or whatever, especially discussing guys like, and we might have even done an inner show talking about guys like Kalel Ware, right? Guys with like motor issues, whatever, giving Ime Udoka the benefit of the doubt of like, what could he grow this player into, right? What can he get this player to become? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'll give you one. I mean, Jalen Green was a guy for a very long time that really shied away from contact, right? Jalen was a guy that tried to go for more finesse in his game, finishing around the rim, the corkscrew layups and all that stuff. And how many times did we get frustrated with, all this stuff that he was throwing up at the rim and nothing was going in? And then this season, we saw him make those steps towards improving his game where now he's not shying away from contact, right? He drives, he initiates, drops his shoulder, he gets physical on his drives, he's finishing through contact, getting to the free throw line more consistently. Like, these are things that I'm sure Ime was chirping in his ear about, dude, like, don't shy away from this contact, use your speed, beat your defender, and force the issue at the rim, right? Make the refs blow the whistle. I will say that would be, if he was like just a guarantee, if you could guarantee me that he was going to be a 40% 3-point shooter, like for his NBA career, I'd start warming up to the idea. It's that on paper, like, yeah, you see like the 38.5%, you're like, all right, it's solid, like but it doesn't quite jump out all the way at you. Yeah, I can warm up to it a little bit more. Again, I think part of it too is, again, his skill set is so duplicative of a couple guys already on the roster, and it feels like, who would he, at this point, we know what Jabari is. We know what Tari is. They've done 2 seasons already. And I think they both still have more room to improve in their respective games as well. I think there's probably a little bit more to be left kind of under the surface for Jabari as far as his play style and how the Rockets could kind of maximize him, especially on the offensive end. But it's like, I'm sitting here trying to convince myself, could I see Risacher being better than one of those two guys? And that's where I'm starting to struggle, is like, Tari's already really impactful. Like, Tari is incredible, right? Jabari, maybe a little bit less so from like the advanced metrics perspective and just like his sheer impact on a game. But Jabari's also grown a ton here in year 2. So can Risacher at some point be better than one of those two guys to beat one of them out for the future 3 or 4 spot on this team? Maybe not.
I think the only way he does it, though, is not by just guarantee of 40%. I think he'll be a good shooter. Like, I think it's a safe bet that he'll stretch the floor and guys will respect him, right? And if you do that, what you have to be is a defensive stopper. Like, Ime has to get in. He has good principles, but he has to teach him to fight through contact, to be physical on wings on the perimeter, to not bite on, you know what I mean? To stay disciplined and really use his physicality and those old vet tricks to get under guys' skin. You know what I mean? And I think that's where he'll make up those gaps on guys like Tari Eason or Jabari Smith Jr., right? Is if he can also be a defensive stopper, a guy you can throw on a team's second best player or best player, then he'll be competing really hard for minutes, because I think he's safe. He's a safe bet to be a better shooter, or at least more respected and give the team more spacing. And if he doesn't drop off way, if he can make up on it defensively, he doesn't drop off too much, then that shooting may even the playing field for guys like Tari and Jabari Smith Jr. I think that's the selling point, but it's going to be hard because we already know these guys are high-level players, and it's going to take some time for him to get there. Like, it's going to take him about 2-3 years before he's just strong enough to hold up.
If he just had a little bit more burst or a little bit more wiggle to his game, I would probably fall in love with him as a prospect. But because like I'm looking at him like, man, like, okay, he can handle the ball, like he can create a little bit, but like he can't create the separation. He can't like actually do anything unless the defense is already in motion. Which, hey, you know what? The Rockets already have Alperen, Sengun. They've already got Jalen Green. They've got 2 guys who will very easily get the defense in motion and break a defense down to where a guy like Risacher could then capitalize on attacking, a broken defense, attacking off the catch, elite play finisher, spot up shooter, all that. But then it's like, I'm trying to envision, okay, what would it look like if you needed him to initiate offense? And then that's where I'm like, oh my God, I start hitting the brakes real hard, and I'm like, it would not look great, right? So I'm so curious. I want to know what if you're watching this episode, we have like struggled. I feel like I've struggled through this episode, like just mentally, emotionally, whatever, for this prospect for Zach. I want to know what you guys are thinking in the YouTube comments, because I'm curious if the comments are going to be as divided as I feel internally about him as a prospect. We want to hear your thoughts. We want you guys to tell us what you think about Zach as a prospect. Would you want to see the Rockets use the number 3 overall pick on him? On that note, Madison, you know the drill. Let everyone know where they can track you down at.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at @MadmanLeaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. What are your thoughts on Zaccharie Risacher? Let us know in those YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.